So the last couple of weeks, we talked about the base phases of training, which is where you focus on your endurance and a little bit of speed work. The build phase of training, which is when you're really starting to challenge your lactate threshold, as well as dial in race-specific intensity. And today we're going to talk about the peak and taper phase of training. So the peak phase really isn't going to last more than 3 or 4 weeks. That would be like a longish taper for a marathon runner, an Ironman triathlon, things like that. And in the peak phase, your primary goal is to start recovering, to rest, let your body repair, heal mentally from all the hours you've been putting in, that sort of thing. What you want to do is short-ish bursts of race-specific intensity, plus or minus a little bit, depending on what distance you're training for. So, for example, if you're getting ready for an Ironman, at this point, in a perfect world, you would have already been putting in your longest rides in the late base, maybe 1 or 2, really solid rides in the build phase, and now you're bringing down the volume. So a long ride in this peak phase of training might be more like a 70 to 80 miler, and you run 4 to 5 miles off the bike, with most of that at Ironman intensity. So that's not super challenging. You might do something like that 2 or 3 weeks prior to Ironman race day. If you're a sprint-focused athlete that's newer to triathlon, you're just going to be doing, let's say, a mile or a mile and a half of race intensity intervals in a running workout. So that could be like 6x400s with a 200 walk recovery in between, maybe even longer. So you're training close to or at race pace, maybe slightly over for those of you who have a lot of experience, but with more rest in between intervals, so longer recovery intervals, and an overall reduction in your total training volume. Now, everybody's different, so it's very difficult to say that everybody should be doing 50% of their maximum week in one of these weeks. There will be situations where, especially in the Ironman world, where athletes feel like, and it's very possible, they weren't able to accomplish all the endurance stuff that they really wanted to in the base phase, which was 4 or 5 months ago at this point. So in limited situations, there may be a call to do one last 100 miler, like 2 weeks before your Ironman. Now, it's not ideal. Much preferable to get that done sooner in the training cycle than now. But if you have not gotten a 100-mile ride up to this point, and now you're feeling good, right? You should be. 2 to 3 weeks out might be the last place I would put a long ride like that. The long run, even further out than that. But again, if your running volume was behind and you're feeling the pressure now, not more than 3 weeks out for a final long run. So again, limited in use. It's not ideal, but if you need to do it, that's when you would do it. Very limited amount of strength training at this point. Really, really light maintenance strength, maybe a couple of times a week. You're focusing on stretching, relaxing, light yoga, not like super power yoga. And your volume, like I said, it's hard to say exactly where everybody's going to be. But if your biggest week in the base phase was 20 hours, then your peak one, which would be 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the race, might be 12 to 13 hours. Peak 2 might be 9 to 10, and then that's how we label them. And then the race week, which would be the taper week, would be very limited, like 30 minutes here, 40 minutes there, almost nothing. And it's important to add that at this point, it's better to be mildly undertrained than 1 or 2% overtrained. You'll read that a lot, you'll hear that a lot, but it's very true. You're better to be over-rested than overtrained going into your goal race. If it's not your goal race, it doesn't matter that much. You can have a bad race at a B or C race and not worry about it, but at your A race, you better be resting, recovering, healing, be healthy 100%. Other things you want to do not take on house projects during this period of time. I see people with my athletes, all of a sudden they have free time on their hands and they're so used to being busy, such a busybody, that they decide to paint the house, one week ahead of their race. don't do that. Just sit on the couch, read a book, watch TV, scroll your Instagram feed if you need to, but just sit around and rest and recover. The taper, like I said, is very low volume. You're trying to sleep as much as you can, and this is where you should really be dialing in your race plan if you have not already figured it all out. You should know when you're taking nutrition, what your intensities are going to be at various stages of each leg of the race, and really just know what you're doing. And then when you get to race day, don't throw your plan out the window and do, this guy's plan. Do your plan. You have to stick to your training program and your race program. So if you have any subjects you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Send this to your friends. Yada, yada, yada. The video for the build explanation is over there. And that's our channel there. Bye-bye.